Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment I shall be reviewing the A6M3. To give you a small historical overview on what is more formally known as the A6M3 Model 32 Reisen, as developed by Mitsubishi Air Bureau, the A6M3 was developed in the latter half of 1941. The idea was for the plane to be an upgraded version of the already in service A6M2 Model 21. The plane was to be improved on three accounts. Firstly, overall high altitude performance. Secondly, a maximisation of the top speed both on the level and in a dive. And thirdly, increasing the ammo capacity of the wing-mounted 20mm cannons. Accounts 1 and 2 were both completed via a couple of means. The most important being the refitting of the engine for a Nakajima Sake 21, an engine providing 1130 horsepower and additionally being fitted with a two-stage supercharger, making it ideal for higher altitude performance. The engine also provided a higher top speed. Moreover, the plane also had a number of improvements made to the airframe, including but not limited to the wingspan being reduced by 1 metre, additionally the aileron fittings being reduced by 1/3 of a metre, and the wing edges being squared off. These improvements to improve the overall roll rate of the plane and its performance at higher speeds. However, this improvement in high speed manoeuvrability came at a massive cost, especially since the engine was heavier than its previous counterpart. As a result, the engine's fuel tank had to be placed behind the engine in order to maintain the same centre of mass position. The capacity of the fuel tank was therefore reduced, and as a result, with the combined higher power of the engine, this meant that the plane's range was reduced. By comparison with the A6M2's 1930 mile range, the A6M3 only had a range of 1477 miles. Additionally, the plane had a wider turn circle and a slightly less prominent climb rate, due to the lack of lift with the shortened wingspan. A lot of Japanese pilots complained, and the complaints reached their boiling point during the course of 1942. The plane was rolled off the assembly line during April of 1942 and onwards, with a limited number being produced for the Guadalcanal campaign. Most Imperial Japanese Naval Air Force pilots complained that the limited range of the plane meant it was very difficult to actually reach Guadalcanal from the Japanese airfields. As a result, many pilots demanded that the A6M2 Model 21 was to be restored, or an improved version which accommodated the A6M2's Model 21's overall traits was to be introduced. The third account of increasing the cannon ammunition was achieved successfully with 100 rounds per gun. With that being said, how does the A6M3 perform in War Thunder? Well, this initial energy pass, i.e. boom and zoom, on multiple enemy fighters comes off quite unsuccessfully. I completely missed the first Hurricane, I took out a Spitfire Mark 5B, and I missed a P-47D Thunderbolt. However, that boom and zoom pass shows that the A6M3 matches up to its historical counterpart, being a very good high-speed performer by comparison with the A6M2. You now have the ability to maintain your control surfaces at speeds of up to 550 km an hour, whereby once you hit 600 km an hour your roll rate will begin to lock up. In my experience, this is roughly 100 km an hour more than in the A6M2. Indeed, we once again use our high speed manoeuvrability at 450 km an hour to dodge incoming fire from a P-47D Thunderbolt, and we begin to pursue them because our increased dive speed and overall speed on the level means that we are able to catch up with a fighter that hasn't come out an extenuated dive. However, we're not able to get close enough to finish off the Thunderbolt, and so a friendly LA-5 does that for us, as we reel in a kill assist in order to go with our first kill. It is at this point that we consider the setup I'm using in this airfield domination game on the map Himalaya. A 300 metre gun convergence for our two 7.7mm machine guns based above the prop, firing Omni-Purpose ammunition, and our two 20mm cannons, one in each wing, outerboard, firing tracer ammunition. I will come on to why I've got this set up very shortly. We also note that I'm using the minimum 45-minute fuel load. Climbing up very quickly to attack this enemy Hurricane by surprise, the Hurricane that we missed at the start of the game, we achieve our second kill very shortly. The reason I use a 300 metre gun convergence is because whilst the A6M3 has become a little bit more of an energetic fighter, it is still a very prominent turn fighter, and most of your kills in my opinion will be obtained during very close turn fights. As a result, a very tight gun convergence allows you to maximise this opportunity when and where necessary in order to kill foes at close range as they're trying to break into turns, and therefore they expose themselves to the maximum surface area possible. Additionally, the Omni-Purpose ammunition in the 7.7mm machine guns is really an arbitrary choice, because the 7.7s will not do as much damage. Indeed, it's the 20mm cannons that do all the hard work, and the tracer belt is filled with high explosive fragmentation tracer rounds, the most powerful rounds in my opinion, for taking down fighters and foes alike. As we broke over a friendly airfield that's about to be recaptured by a friendly teammate, we notice an enemy P-47 trying to attack our LA-5 on the airfield, and so we bank round. Indeed, while we are at 440 km an hour, we are unable to intercept the Thunderbolt before they take out our friendly teammate, and if the Thunderbolt had not started banking round to the left, they would have got away. However, we catch them just on the edge of our burst. With that pilot kill securing us our third kill, we note that whilst the overall energetic nature of the A6M3 is improved, it is still unable to catch up with a number of planes. The Thunderbolt in particular, if he had flown level, as I said a minute ago, would have gotten away from us. Now, with 4 opponents ahead of us, we show off the overall qualities of the A6M3 as a turn fighter, going immediately for the Spitfire Mark 1A, because they're the best turn fighter out of the 4 available, and then we break up and around onto an I-185, the second best turn fighter in the engagement group. Another kill to achieve our ace. We then go head to head with a Messerschmitt 109 F4, who lands a couple of blows on us but not enough to do any major damage. We then loop back up and catch the F4 off guard as they're still trying to loop over. A Yak-9T then breaks up on us, and whilst we manage to avoid most of their gunfire, we do get clipped by a 37mm round on the wing, and that does significant damage to our right wing but not enough to put us out. As a result, we use our superior stall speed in order to come down the Yak-9T and take them out accordingly, allowing us to achieve our 7th kill very shortly. I hope that small engagement there has depicted how well the A6M3 holds up as a turn fighter, much like the A6M2 that you have flown previously, I hope. The interesting thing is that despite the wider turn circle of the A6M3 by comparison to the A6M2, this plane is probably one of the best turn fighters for its tier, simply because there's no other plane that can match its turn circle. Additionally, as we noted, we performed a number of small loop manoeuvres in order to get on top of our foes. The nice thing about the A6M3 is because of its acceleration, which only extends up to 350 km an hour, because of its great low to medium speed acceleration, this plane is able to retain energy very nicely. And additionally, because of its lower stall speed than most counterparts, you are able to keep in the fight for longer and indeed force your opponents to bleed out their energy before you get a shot on them. As a result, this means you can control a lot of the turn fights without any risk to yourself. We notice an enemy Thunderbolt attacking our ships, at which point we dive after them. Again, we're going to see that if this Thunderbolt had not turned around, they probably could have got away from us if they'd flown off level. However, as the Thunderbolt breaks round, we perform a split S because we know we've got them, and they're oblivious to our presence. As they make their second pass over a friendly destroyer, we then force them to bank out to the left, at which point we can secure our 8th and final kill for this game, with another pilot kill. So, I hope this first gameplay has depicted how well the A6M3 still holds up in a turn fighter role, and indeed this is where you'll get the majority of your kills. To reiterate the point I made about the low to medium speed acceleration, going from say 200 km an hour to 350 km an hour is very easy to do in this plane on the level. However, trying to go from say 350 km an hour to 450 km an hour is a whole new story. This plane feels very sluggish in acceleration beyond 350 km an hour, and this is something you need to be aware of, and this is how I think a lot of planes can get away from you very quickly, by comparison with planes such as the Yak-3, and indeed, say, the F4U-1D Corsair, battle rating contemporaries. We go head to head with a Yak-9K here, we both avoid each other's potential firing lines, at which point I loop over, the Yak-9K comes underneath. And it's at this point that I've got the Yak-9K in my grasp. I've got a lot of energy left, the Yak-9K's taken the lower altitude position, and unfortunately it's a pilot error here which causes me to lose out on what would have been my 9th kill. And as the game comes to its end, we fly off into the sun, and we reflect by looking at some endgame stats. So, we reflect on that game by noting that we got 8 kills and 1 assist, netting us 18,912 silver lions and additionally 1,301 research points, with all of those going towards our research on the B7A2. We conclude that gameplay by noting that the A6M3 is, as always, a brilliant turn fighter. We managed to take out 4 foes in a very short area and short space of time, and additionally we managed to minimise the damage done to ourselves, using our superior stall speed in order to force a Yak 9T into an uncomfortable position. However, at the same time we also indicated that many of our foes will be able to get away from us because we do not have the speed on the level or the speed on the dive, despite the fact we have upgraded this plane from the A6M2 in order to try and counteract that. The guns are deadly at close range, and indeed all the work comes from the cannons, with the extended ammo capacity by comparison with the A6M2 being very rewarding and allowing you to fire off more salvos before you'll need to reload. Very shortly we'll compare our score with the rest of our teammates. However, it's also worth noting that the durability of the A6M3 is much like that of the A6M2. It is poor, and getting a hit will usually scream imminent death. However, we were fortunate in that game not to take any significant damage, especially with that lucky head-on pass against the Messerschmitt 109F4. Still, I wouldn't advise putting yourself in a compromised situation when you can take the damage. By comparison to the rest of our teammates, we see that we came first, not by a huge margin, and despite our overall contribution, we still lost the game because we did not prioritise defending our own airfield or indeed our little patrol boats. We contributed where necessary to defending our destroyer in the face of a P-47 Thunderbolt, however, it wasn't enough. Still, it is time to move on to our second gameplay to be exhibited for this review, and this involves a more energetic approach. Ergo, we move on to our second gameplay. It is a ground strike game on the map Alpine Meadows, with the same setup as in the previous iteration. From the start, I'm going to go into a very long climb, and we're going to see that while the A6M3 does not possess the best climb rate over short distance, indeed that award goes to say the Yakovlev Yak 3 down low, or the Messerschmitt 109F4 up at higher altitudes, the A6M3 is probably one of the best long period climbers, simply because its light airframe and indeed quite powerful engine mean that it can retain its speed as it gains altitude. The WEP also means that you're able to boost your speed back up accordingly. And we are going to climb to an altitude of 4,800 metres very quickly, and despite the overall cloud layer restricting a lot of the altitude battles in this gameplay, we're able to show that in the case this cloud wasn't here, the A6M3 would be able to achieve an air superiority role, or begin to achieve that very quickly. We continue to climb, breaking into the cloud layer and making sure that no foe is actually chasing us up in a very direct and short path. So, having notified that the climb rate is quite good, we move on then by considering exactly how well the plane performs up at higher altitudes. Well, of course the question will be, is the A6M3 ever going to intercept bombers? In short, potentially. However, the A6M3 is not designed for that due to its poor durability. Indeed, bombers such as B-25 Mitchells will shred the A6M3 where they get the chance with their rear 50 cals. Conversely, bombers such as the Heinkel 111, Junkers 88 and Illusion 4 are less armoured and therefore softer targets. Although they may have some guns, you are able to take those out quite quickly. As a result, going for medium to light bombers can be done. However, going for the heavier medium bombers, indeed heavy bombers, is something which I would advise being left to, say, pilots in P-63 King Cobras or in Messerschmitt 109F4s, because they have the armament and the armour to do so. Your role extends more to an air superiority role, and indeed a role of suppression, whereby your ability to climb to higher altitudes before the majority of enemy players, and indeed a Messerschmitt 109 ML3 has matched us up to this altitude. Your ability to climb with, or outmatch a number of players in terms of climb, means that you can suppress the higher altitude regions and therefore secure those spaces for your friendly bombers. It's at this point I decide to go into an energetic dive. I turn my engine off at 400 km an hour to demonstrate that really the manoeuvrability of the A6M3 is captured at 650 km an hour or less. I begin to bank very shortly in order to restrict my speed to dead on 650 km an hour, and the roll rate is starting to stiffen at this point, however not to an extent whereby I can't control the plane. Indeed, the controls become sluggish at just over 650. We denote a Yakovlev Yak 3 very close to the mountain, and we decide to put them into it. Dodging a tree, we then break up on an enemy F6F-3 Hellcat, catching them completely by surprise and unaware, achieving a nice critical which will denote our second kill. We then break onto the back of a P-39 Q5 Aerocobra to achieve 3 kills in a very short period of time. We then break off, checking around us, and checking around us again, to see an enemy LA5FN who was trying to achieve the perfect shot on us coming in. However, we're able to use our high speed manoeuvrability at 550 km/h speed in order to begin to loop and manoeuvre out the way of potential incoming gunfire. As the LA5 breaks underneath us, we're able to turn with them, and indeed use our better stall speed in order to keep turning and raising the altitude of the helix. The LA5 at this point has to bank down because they've got an insufficient amount of speed or energy in order to keep up this game. We achieve a critical on their wing, and indeed I believe this extends to their tail very shortly, and as a result, as the LA5 tries to break over the little mountain ridge, they crash into the tree line, providing us with our 4th kill. It's at this point that I level out and decide to break away, because I have an enemy Corsair coming in for me, and unfortunately I am unable to outrun the Corsair, a plane which could outrun the A6M3 historically. However, I managed to make it back to friendly lines in time for a friendly fighter to engage the Corsair. In the meantime, I have to take care of a Yakovlev Yak-1B that is being chased with a number of teammates in tow. The Yak-1B clips our left wing as we snap roll out the way, and I decide at this point to avoid any further damage to my plane and loop back over and finish off the Yak-1B myself, simply because I'm starting to get concerned that the Yak-1B will get one final pass at me if I decide to level out and continue to fly off. I turn off my engine and break down vertical, catching the Yak-1B at very close range. Indeed, more of a mercy kill than anything else. That was a 5th kill to our tally, allowing us to achieve our ace. It's at this point that I break off and level out, once again maintaining a speed of roughly 400 km/h shortly, due to our subpar acceleration at higher speeds, and I notice an enemy Heinkel 112 in the distance gradually coming towards us. As a result, I decide to go for the head-on. So at this point I keep checking around to make sure no friendly or enemy fighters are coming in, and I denote that the Heinkel has got the superior armament in the nose. Ergo, I break out the way and loop over the top. The idea is now I can use my superior turn circle to break round behind the Heinkel 112B0 and take them out accordingly. And indeed, as the Heinkel 112 breaks upwards in order to go for a friendly fighter, I finish them off at the peak of the climb. So at this point that I break out and decide to loop back round, picking up my energy and looking for the next target. There's a Corsair chasing a friendly fighter that's just out of my reach, and very shortly a MiG-3 presents itself to me right in front of me, at which point I shake it off a friendly tail. 7 kills in the bag, I fly through the exploding wreckage and gradually break away from what was a short furball. Again, we reiterate the point that the A6M3 performs well in the furball and is a very good turn fighter, although at the same time we have shown so far in this game that the A6M3 is also a surprisingly effective energy fighter, and coming out of cloud layers will actually take a lot of opponents by surprise because it's the last thing they expect a Reisen to do, especially this Reisen. Ergo, I build a little bit more altitude up and reload my guns, looking at this Junkers 88A4 and asking myself the question, do I have the time to climb to them? I soon note that friendly fighters are actually proceeding in the form of a Heinkel 112 in order to take the Junkers 88 out, and so I decide to call off my approach, also noting a P-39N Aerocobra coming over. The final question to ask is the A6M3 altitude restricted? We've already denoted its speed restriction, but does this plane have an altitude cap? To be honest, the plane performs consistently all the way up to, in my opinion, roughly 7,000 metres. You will never need to take this plane up to that altitude unless you are trying to chase, say, a Messerschmitt 109 F4, although that is a plane which can outrun you, and usually such chases become pointless in the end. I prefer to employ this plane up to 5,000 metres, simply because I try to restrict the overall altitude height of a given game by using my superior climb rate at the start in order to achieve the air superiority role. However, you can turn fight with most opponents and indeed perform short period energy fights over the course of this given altitude range. Do not be afraid to mix things up, both in the turn circle and indeed in the energy role. And with that gameplay over, let's take a look at some more endgame stats. We ponder that we managed to achieve 7 kills, no assists, but this netted us 23,258 silver lines, and additionally 1,383 research points, all of those going towards our research once again on the B7A2. We conclude this review in the end by noting that the A6M3 is no longer a turn restricted fighter. It is quite a good energy fighter as well over the shorter periods, and as long as you manage your speed, making sure not to exceed 650 km/h at most. Beyond this speed, the control surfaces become very sluggish, and indeed the roll rate begins to lock up. We should also note that the roll rate of the A6M3 is higher than that on the A6M2, as historically found. It is comparable to, say, the roll rate of a Yak-3, and as a result you can change your direction much more easily, and at higher speeds this becomes a very important factor, especially when dogfighting with planes such as the P-47 Thunderbolt or a Focke-Wulf 190A1, planes which have high roll rates or come in on long energy passes and you'll need to dodge accordingly. However, at the same time, do not forget that the armament on this plane is confined to the wings essentially with the two 20mm cannons, and as a result catching opponents at convergence, or as I do at close convergence, will allow you to achieve your kills much more quickly than burst firing over longer distances, unless you set your convergence that far. Very shortly we'll be taking a look at our stats by comparison to the rest of our team, but we reiterate the fact that a speed range of 250 to 550 km/h is the most ideal for the A6M3, as this is where your control surfaces, and indeed your roll rate, will be at their optimum, although variations extending slightly above and below are acceptable. By comparison to the rest of our team, we see that we came first by a rather large margin, almost doubling the score of our next teammate, simply because we were in and out of the fight at that very start period, achieving 3 kills in a very short space of time, adding to that a 4th, finishing off the 5th that our teammates could not do, and then packing another 2 in a very short period further. This is not a reflection of the overall performance of friendly players, but more of a performance of the A6M3, a plane which, to be honest, can mix it up in 2 roles, which is rather unexpected, and indeed I did not expect this plane to be so good in the energy role when I first bought it. So, if you're looking for a Reisen which performs both in the vertical and horizontal and is not afraid to take its speed above 500 km/h unlike the A6M2, then the A6M3 is the Reisen for you. So I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.